You probably think Chinese parents put their children in front of a piano for the prestige or the recital photos, and some do. But in my house and the house I grew up in, the piano was never about music at all. My son sits at it for 30 minutes almost every day, and I have never once cared whether he becomes a musician. I care about the invisible thing those 30 minutes are building in him day after day that has almost nothing to do with the sound. And I have to say this carefully because the internet is full of people promising that if you make your child play the violin, you'll build a little mathematician, that music rewires the brain into a logic machine. And I'm not going to tell you that because it isn't true. And you deserve better than a myth. What I'm going to tell you is stranger and more useful. If you've ever wondered why this one cultural habit runs so deep and what it's actually for, you're in the right place because the real answer is not the one you've been sold. Let me be honest about what this is and isn't, because I don't want to waste the trust you gave me by clicking. I'm not a neuroscientist, and I'm going to be careful in this video to separate what I've watched with my own eyes from what science can actually prove, because those are two different things, and most videos on this topic blur them on purpose. There is a popular story that music lessons make children smarter, that they raise IQ and turn kids into math prodigies. And I have to tell you plainly that when researchers looked hard at that claim, controlling for the fact that the families who can afford years of lessons are different in a dozen other ways, most of that magic effect shrank down to almost nothing. So if you came here for me to promise that piano will make your child a genius, I can't, and anyone who does is selling you something. But that is not why my family has done this for generations. And once you understand the real reason, you'll see why the science missing the magic doesn't trouble me at all. Because we were never doing it for the magic. We were doing it for something much more ordinary and much more powerful. Here is the thing the piano actually teaches. The thing I watch happen in my son every single day. It teaches him how to stay. That sounds almost too simple, so let me show you what I mean. When my son sits down to learn a new piece, he cannot play it. His hands don't know it. The first attempt is clumsy and wrong, and there's a very specific moment, maybe 10 seconds in, where his whole body wants to quit, where the frustration rises, and the easy thing would be to stop and do something that rewards him instantly. And every day, in that exact moment, he practices the one skill that I believe matters more than almost any other a human being can own, which is the ability to stay inside difficulty without fleeing it, to keep his hands on the keys when everything in him wants to leave. That is the real lesson, not the notes, the staying. And in a world engineered to let us escape the smallest discomfort with a swipe of a thumb, the ability to remain inside a hard thing until it yields is becoming rarer and more valuable by the year. Now watch how that connects to logic, because this is where the real link lives. And it's a truer link than the one you were promised. Logical thinking, real problem solving, the kind that solves a hard equation or debugs a broken system or works through a complicated decision, is not only about raw intelligence, it is also enormously about the willingness to stay with a problem that is not yet solved, to sit in the discomfort of not knowing long enough for the answer to arrive. Many people don't fail at hard problems because they aren't smart enough. They fail because they leave too early, they hit the wall of frustration and they quit, or they reach for the answer key, or they let their attention slide to something easier. The child who has practiced for years the physical act of staying inside a hard piece until his hands finally find it, has built the same muscle that hard thinking asks for, not a music muscle, a staying muscle, and it shows up everywhere else that effort is required. Let me put you in the room because I want you to see what this actually looks like, not as an idea, but as a Tuesday evening. My son is at the piano working on a passage he cannot yet play, 8 bars where the left hand does one thing and the right hand does another, and the two refuse to cooperate. He plays it. It falls apart in the same place it always falls apart, right where the hands cross. His shoulders go up. I can see the exact moment the frustration arrives because it arrives in his body before it reaches his face. A small tightening, a lean back from the keys. This is the moment, not the music. This moment, repeated a few times a week for years, is the entire thing I am talking about. Because what happens in the next 4 seconds is what he is really learning. He can leave mentally, even while his body stays on the bench, checking out, going through the motions, waiting for the 30 minutes to end. Or he can stay, actually stay, lean back in, and face the 8 bars that just beat him. And the difference between the child who learns to do the second thing and the child who never does is, I am convinced, one of the largest differences between two human lives, and almost nobody is deliberately training it anymore. What I do in that moment matters enormously, and I got it wrong for a long time before I got it right. The instinct, the loving instinct, is to rescue him, to say it's okay, take a break, that's hard, you don't have to, and there is a time for that. But if I rescue him every single time the frustration arrives, I teach him that frustration is a signal to stop, which is the exact opposite of the lesson. So instead, most of the time, I do something quieter. I don't praise, I don't push, I don't rescue, I just stay with him. I sit close and I say calmly, okay, that spot again, just that spot, slowly. And I let him feel that the frustration is survivable, that an adult he trusts is unbothered by it, that the hard place is not an emergency, but simply the place where the work is. The calm in my voice is doing more teaching than any instruction. I am showing him with my own steadiness that difficulty is normal and not dangerous. A child borrows his sense of safety from the adults around him. And if I stay calm in the face of his frustration, he slowly learns to stay calm in the face of it too. That borrowed calm, practiced a few hundred times at a piano bench, eventually becomes his own. If any of that is landing, if you're starting to see your own child or your own younger self in what I'm describing, do one small thing for me before we go deeper, because it helps this reach the next tired parent who needs it. Tell me in the comments the thing you were made to stick with as a child, music, or anything else, and whether you're grateful for it now or still carry a complicated feeling about it. I read these, and on this channel, they turn into something rare. And if this is already shifting how you think about what practice is for, subscribe, because in a few minutes I'm going to show you the specific way we practice, the part most Western families get exactly backwards, and then the honest cost of all this, which I won't hide from you. I make these for the person who suspects the loud, easy version of modern life is quietly starving their children of something and wants to know what. So let me take you inside the actual practice, because the how matters as much as the why. And this is where the logic really gets built. In many Western homes, practice means repetition. Play it again, play it 10 times, get your minutes in. But mindless repetition is almost useless, and it's often where a child's love of the instrument goes to die. The way I was taught and the way I teach my son, practice is not repetition at all, it is diagnosis. When he plays a passage and it breaks in the same spot every time, we stop. We don't play it again. We ask a question. What exactly failed there? Which finger? Which note? Which change? We isolate the single broken moment the way you'd isolate a single faulty line in a long piece of code, and we work only on that, slowly, until it holds, and then we rebuild the passage around it. Do you see what that is? That is debugging. That is the exact cognitive move at the heart of every logical discipline, from mathematics to engineering to medicine, the move of narrowing a large failure down to its precise cause and fixing that. My son has been practicing that move on the piano since he was 5, not because we told him it was logic, because that is simply how you get good at anything hard, and the piano makes the process visible, physical, and daily. Let me make that concrete, because it's the single most useful thing in this whole video, and most people practice the exact opposite way. Go back to those 8 bars where his hands cross. The wrong way, the way almost everyone does it, is to go back to the beginning of the piece and play the whole thing again, hoping the hard part comes out better this time. It won't, or not reliably, because he just spent most of his attention on the easy bars he already knows and arrived at the hard spot tired and rushed. And he practiced the failure one more time. Repetition without diagnosis just carves the mistake deeper. The right way is almost the reverse of instinct. We don't start from the top. We find the exact half second where it breaks, and we make it smaller and smaller until it's just 2 notes, the 2 that collide. We play those 2 notes, slowly, correctly, 10 times, until his hand knows them cold. Then we add the note before and the note after. Then the full bar, still slow. Then the 2 bars around it. We are building outward from the point of failure, not running at it from a distance and hoping. And when we finally play the whole passage and it holds, he feels something I want every child to feel, which is that the hard thing was not hard because he lacked some magic talent other children have. It was hard because it hadn't been broken down yet. Once it was broken down, it was completely doable. That single realization felt in the body over and over is worth more than any amount of talent, because it's the belief that hard things are just undecomposed easy things. And that belief is the engine of every problem solver who ever lived. And there's a second thing the instrument does that the page of math cannot, which is that it makes error impossible to hide. When a child does a math worksheet, a wrong answer is a small quiet mark that can be glossed over. But when you play a wrong note, everyone in the room hears it, most of all you. The instrument is a ruthless, honest teacher. It gives instant, undeniable feedback, and it does not care about your feelings or your excuses. The note was right or it was wrong, and you both heard which. This is an extraordinary thing to expose a child to early, gently, in a low-stakes way, because it trains something the modern world actively erodes, which is a calm, non-defensive relationship with your own errors. A child who plays an instrument learns in his body that a mistake is not a catastrophe and not an identity. It is just information. It is a signal that says, here, look here, this is the part that needs work. The child who can hear his own wrong note without collapsing into shame or defensiveness has been handed one of the most important tools a logical mind requires, which is the ability to be corrected by reality without falling apart. We're about halfway through, and if you take only one idea with you from all of this, let it be this one, because it's the hinge the whole thing turns on. The transfer from music to logic is real, but it does not travel through the music. It travels through the habits the music builds, the daily staying, the diagnostic practice, the calm relationship with error, the willingness to slow down and fix the one broken thing instead of rushing past it. These are not musical skills. They are thinking skills, life skills, that the instrument happens to be an unusually good teacher of, because it is patient, honest, structured, and daily. Music is not the calculator. Music is the gym. And what gets stronger in that gym is not a love of Mozart, though that can come too. What gets stronger is the child's whole capacity to face a hard, structured problem and stay with it until it yields. If that reframe just landed for you, share this video with the one parent you know who is exhausted, who suspects their child needs something the screen isn't giving them, because this reframes the entire struggle, and it can reach them in 20 minutes. That's the whole reason a channel like this can exist. There is also something in the structure of music itself that quietly trains the pattern mind, and I want to be careful and honest here too, because this is where the science is genuinely interesting rather than overblown. Music is built out of patterns nested inside patterns. A scale is a rule, a chord is a rule, a rhythm is a repeating structure you learn to feel and predict. When a child learns to read music, he is learning to take a set of abstract symbols on a page and translate them in real time into precise physical action while keeping time while reading ahead to what's coming next. That is a genuinely demanding act of pattern processing and working memory, done live under the pressure of a moving tempo. I'm not going to claim that this rewires his brain into a logic machine because I can't prove that, and the honest researchers argue about how much of it transfers, but I can tell you what I see. I see a child who has spent years turning symbols into structured action, getting comfortable, deeply comfortable with the idea that a page of abstract notation is not scary, that it is just a pattern waiting to be decoded step by careful step. And a child who is not afraid of abstract notation, who has met it every day at the piano since he was small, sits down in front of a page of algebra with a very different feeling in his body than the child for whom abstract symbols have only ever meant tests and fear. You might reasonably ask why it has to be an instrument at all. If the real lessons are staying, diagnosis, calm error correction, and daily return, couldn't a child learn those from chess, or sport, or building things, or 100 other hard pursuits? And the honest answer is yes, partly. Any difficult, structured discipline practiced daily with warmth can build some of this. I am not here to tell you the piano is magic and the soccer ball is not, because that would be the same kind of overclaim I warned you about at the start. But an instrument has a rare combination of qualities that makes it an unusually complete teacher, and it's worth understanding why my culture landed on it so consistently. It is abstract, requiring the constant translation of symbol into action. It is immediate, giving feedback the very instant a note is wrong, with no delay to blur the lesson. It is precise, admitting no fuzzy, almost right the way an essay might. It is cumulative, so that today's work builds visibly on last month's in a way the child can hear. It is solitary, teaching him to be accountable to the work itself and not to a cheering crowd or a competing opponent. And it is endless, offering no final level where mastery is complete, so that it teaches the humbling, essential truth that there is always a harder piece. Few human activities combine all of those at once. A sport has the crowd and the opponent. A video game has the feedback, but not the abstraction or the patience. The instrument sits at a rare intersection, which is why so many cultures that thought hard about how to shape a mind arrived independently at putting a child in front of one. Now, let me get concrete about how a family actually does this without breaking the child, because this is where it goes wrong most often, and where the caricature of the cold, pushing Chinese parent has some truth in it that I don't want to dodge. The goal is not ours, it is not tears. It is not a child chained to a bench performing his parent's ambition. The way this works, when it works, is short and daily and consistent, rather than long and rare and dramatic. 30 focused minutes every day does far more than 3 brutal hours on a Sunday, because the point was never the volume of practice. The point is the daily return, the showing up, the small repeated act of sitting down and facing the hard thing again, so that facing the hard thing becomes simply what you do, a part of who you are rather than a battle you have to win each time. What we are really building underneath the music is an identity. A child who sits down every day and works patiently at something difficult is slowly becoming a person who sits down and works patiently at difficult things. That identity is the true inheritance. The music is just the vehicle that carries it. And I have to be honest about the cost because I promised you I would, and because this channel does not sell you a flawless tradition. Done wrong, the same practice produces exactly the wounded overachiever the stereotype warns about. A child pushed too hard, praised only for performance, made to feel that his worth rises and falls with his playing, does not grow up logical and calm. He grows up anxious and brittle, technically skilled and privately hollow, excellent at the instrument and estranged from any joy in it. I have met these adults. Some of them grew up beside me. The discipline that can build a steady mind can, turned a few degrees colder, build a frightened one, and the difference between the two is almost entirely the warmth and the why underneath the practice. If the child knows he is loved exactly the same, whether the passage is perfect or broken, the daily discipline builds strength. If he suspects the love is riding on the performance, the very same discipline builds fear. Same bench, same 30 minutes, completely different human being at the end of it. So I have kept the structure my parents gave me, the daily return, the diagnostic practice, the honest instrument, and I have tried to pour into it the warmth that was sometimes missing from my own childhood, so that my son gets the strength without the shame. Let me show you exactly where that line runs, because it is finer than people think, and the same words can land on either side of it. Picture 2 mothers, and the same broken passage and the same tired child. The first mother, when the passage finally holds, says, "Good, that's what I expect, now the next one." The second mother, when the passage finally holds, says, "Look at that. You stayed with it and you got it." Almost the same scene. Completely different message underneath. The first child learns that success is the baseline and anything less is failure, that the love and approval are conditional on the performance, that he is only as good as his last passage. The second child learns that the staying is what's being seen, that the effort itself is the thing his mother values, that he is safe whether the passage breaks or holds. Give it 10 years. The first child may play beautifully and feel nothing but relief when he finishes and dread before he begins, forever chasing an approval that recedes every time he reaches it. The second child may play just as well and actually enjoy it, and more importantly, carries into the rest of his life the deep knowledge that he is loved for who he is and not for what he produces. Same bench, same discipline, same hard passages. The only variable is what the child believes the practice means about his worth, and that variable is set almost entirely by the adult's tone in the small daily moments. This is the part the stereotype gets catastrophically wrong, and the part I watch most carefully in myself, because I know how easy it would be to slip across that line without noticing, especially on the days I'm tired, and to hand my son the anxiety instead of the strength. There is a deeper current under all of this that I don't want to leave unspoken, because it's the real reason this tradition has lasted, far beyond any exam or any advantage. What a family is really doing, when it sits a child at an instrument every day for years, is teaching that child a specific relationship with time and effort that the modern world is rapidly destroying. We live now inside machines designed to give us everything instantly, to collapse the distance between wanting and having, down to nothing, to make us forget that anything good was ever slow. And a child raised entirely inside that instant world never learns the one truth that every meaningful life eventually requires, which is that the things most worth having are built slowly, through patient daily effort, with no reward for a very long time, until one day the hands that could not play the piece simply can. The piano teaches a child that mastery is real, that it is reachable, and that the path to it is not talent or luck or a shortcut, but the humble, unglamorous act of returning to the hard thing every single day. That lesson, once it lives in the body, transfers to absolutely everything the child will ever try to master. It is the opposite of everything the screen is teaching, and it may be the single most protective thing you can build into a child growing up in this particular century. I saw this land in my son in a way that had nothing to do with music, and it's the moment I knew the practice was working. He was struggling with something at school, a subject that had gone from easy to hard the way subjects do when a child hits the wall, where natural talent runs out and real work begins. And I watched him get frustrated, and I braced myself, because this is the cliff where so many children quietly decide they are just not a math person or not a science person, and begin the long, slow retreat from anything difficult. But he didn't retreat. He got a look on his face I recognized, the exact look he gets at the piano when a passage beats him. And he broke the problem into a smaller problem, and then a smaller one, and he stayed with it. He didn't know he was doing it. He didn't say to himself, I will now apply the diagnostic method I learned at the piano. It had simply become how he approaches a hard thing, wired in below the level of conscious thought, the way your first language lives in you without your having to think about grammar. That is the transfer, if you want to call it that. Not some mystical rewiring that makes him smarter, but a habit of mind so deeply practiced that it became instinct, and now shows up automatically wherever a hard, structured problem appears. That is what all those 30-minute evenings were quietly building, one frustrating passage at a time, long before either of us could see it. And here is the part that moves me most and that I did not expect when I started. The daily practice did not just build his capability, it built his relationship with himself, a child who repeatedly experiences himself doing hard things and succeeding, not because he was gifted, but because he stayed, develops a specific and precious belief, which is that he is the kind of person who can do hard things. That belief is quieter and far more durable than confidence built on praise or talent, because it is built on evidence, on hundreds of remembered occasions where the passage was impossible, and then, through nothing but patient work, became possible. You cannot give a child that belief with words, you cannot praise it into him. He can only earn it, himself, by living through the cycle of struggle and mastery enough times that it becomes part of how he understands who he is. The instrument is simply one of the most reliable machines humans ever built for generating that cycle over and over in a form small enough for a child to survive and frequent enough for the lesson to take. There is one more thing I want to say about why this particular habit survived so many generations when so much else was let go, because I think it explains the depth of it. My grandmother sat my mother at an instrument. My mother sat me. I sit my son. And not one of us, I suspect, could have articulated in words the full reason why, the way I'm trying to articulate it for you now. It was passed down not as a theory, but as a practice, a thing you simply do, the way you pass down a recipe or a way of folding dumplings hand to hand without the explanation traveling alongside it. And I've come to believe that traditions survive precisely because they don't depend on each generation understanding them. If my grandmother had needed my mother to grasp the cognitive science of deliberate practice before she'd put her at the piano, the whole thing would have died in a single generation. Instead, it survived as a habit, as something the family simply did, and the wisdom rode along inside the habit whether or not anyone could name it. What I'm doing in this video, trying to make the reasons explicit, is actually a slightly dangerous act because once you turn a living practice into a set of stated reasons, people start optimizing the reasons and discarding the parts that don't seem to serve them, and often they throw away exactly the piece that was quietly doing the most important work. So take what I'm telling you as one person's attempt to understand a gift she was handed, not as a formula. The practice is wiser than my explanation of it. It usually is. And so when people ask me why Chinese parents prioritize early musical training and expect me to say something about prestige or about making little geniuses, I tell them the truth, which is quieter and larger than the myth. We are not building musicians. Most of these children will not become musicians, and that was never the goal. We are not even really building mathematicians, whatever the internet promises. What we are building in 30 patient minutes a day is a human being who knows how to stay inside a hard thing, how to face an error without shame, how to break a large problem into its smallest broken piece and fix it, and how to trust that slow, daily effort leads somewhere real. Those are the true foundations of logical thinking and of a great deal more than logical thinking. The instrument is just the oldest, most patient, most honest teacher we ever found for lessons that were never really about music at all. If this video shifted something in the way you see musical training and the quiet things it's really teaching our children, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more on how the world's wisest cultures quietly build calmer, sharper, more resilient human minds, subscribe. There's a lot more coming. See you in the next one.